Welcome to Business Innovators Radio, featuring industry influencers and trendsetters sharing proven strategies to help you build a better life right now.
Hello and welcome to the show. This is your host, Neil Howe, but today we have a very special guest host. Her name is Shireen Richter, all the way from South Africa. Shireen is a laughter professor in South Africa, and she is putting together a book called Expert Mavericks, and she's interviewing some high-profile people from South Africa who have a lot to share in regards to what it is to be successful and what you need to do to have success and happiness in your life. So really looking forward to hearing those South African accents and hearing from all these guest experts that she is going to interview. So take it away, Shireen.
My name is Shireen Richter, laughter and happiness professor. Today I'm interviewing a maverick for the book that we are writing, Expert Mavericks. His name is Rowan Swartz. Rowan is a maverick entrepreneur who has accomplished huge success, not once, not twice, but multiple times. Over and over again, he has created industries that did not previously exist in South Africa before. To me, that is really the true definition of a maverick, but let's hear it from Rowan himself. Good morning, Rowan.
Good morning, Shireen, and thank you for that wonderful introduction. What would you like me to?
Well, firstly, it's an honor to have you here, and it's an honor to hear your story that we are hoping will inspire others to become mavericks in their own life. Being a maverick takes a special ability. What does the term expert maverick mean to you? Can you explain to us how you see yourself as being a maverick and what a maverick means?
So the term expert maverick, let's break that up into the two words, maverick and expert. First of all, what I see as a maverick is someone that does something in a unique, unconventional way, has a unique and unconventional way of looking at things and obviously putting those things into action. An expert is someone that can do something successfully, but more importantly, not do it just successfully once, but repeatedly do it successfully.
And you've really managed to do that in your life over and over again. And these are the things that we'd like to share. In your life, this obviously began many, many, many years ago. So let's go back in time and tell us how it all began and when did you realize that you had these maverick or entrepreneurial skills?
Well, I always like to tell people some stories of some of my earlier businesses. I always felt I was entrepreneurial and I was always doing things to make money and to try and be successful. One of my earliest businesses that I ever had is quite an interesting one. I found out where the local cinema used to throw away their old posters when a movie had obviously finished showing. And I used to go and get into the rubbish bin over there and pull out these old posters on a regular basis, take them to school, and then sell them to my friends. I always had an idea of making money.
So that's an incredible story because at 10 years old, most kids are thinking about soccer and today PlayStation and iPads. Nobody's thinking about making money. What was your drive to make money? Was it to become rich? Did you have visions and dreams? Why were you doing this?
Well, I think what we need to do is maybe just go a little bit back into my life and understand where I came from. Because interestingly enough, people have always said, well, has your dream always to have been rich? My dream was never to have been rich. Because of where I came from, my dream was always to not be poor. And there's a subtle distinction. Someone who's always wants to be rich makes their first million, makes their second million, carries on, and that's their driving force behind them. They're always driven to make more and more. Looking back at my background and where I came from, I was more concerned about not being poor and not living in a poor environment. And that's what drove me to become successful. I obviously always feel I had an entrepreneurial flair, but I came from what was considered in those days a poor family. And unfortunately, at a very young age, I was at the age of 2, I lost my father. I had an older sister at the time. my mother was pregnant with my younger brother, and there we were, a family of a mother plus 3 kids under the age of 5, and very little income, a single mother bringing up this family. And I always tell how I understood the value of money due to this sort of upbringing, and it was always my determination not to be poor when I was older.
I think it's so relevant for so many people in the world today, because people are living in fear of poverty, and millions of people do. And what inspired me about your story was you took your maverick ability and changed the situation. You made a success. So for people listening who are fearful of being poor or do want to make money and improve their situation in life, it's possible. Anything is possible if you believe.
That is correct. I mean, anything is possible, and it's not only being possible on the money front. As I say, I wasn't my primary focus wasn't to make money, it was to just make sure I wasn't poor. And the reason I say this is that I have a whole plethora of other goals and other things in my life which are very important to me outside of just building businesses and making money.
So sticking back in the time of your youth where you went through this struggle and this really difficult time, you had some incredible role models. One of them you mentioned being your mom, who taught you a lot about life. Share some of that with us. How did that help you and drive you to be the person you are today?
So obviously I always looked up to my mother, and it's only probably in later years that you really understand the difficulties that my mother truly went through. There was my mother, pregnant, 8 months pregnant, when we lost my father. And here she was already had 2 kids and was left not destitute, but fairly poor after the loss of my father. And we lived in a house whereby there was always food on the table, but not much else. As a matter of fact, I recall a very interesting story. I always explain to people that I never knew why a lipstick was called a lipstick, because my mother never ever used lipstick in the conventional sense where she would hold the stick and smear it onto her lips. And the reason for this was that the only lipstick she could afford, well, she couldn't afford lipstick, so she used to go to all her friends and get the used up lipstick sticks and use a brush to paint lipstick onto her mouth. So we grew up in an environment where everything was hand-me-downs. Clothes were hand-me-downs from friends. Everything was hand-me-downs, and grew up in that environment and not understanding what else was out there. One grows up expecting and believing that that is the norm. And obviously only in my later years does one fully appreciate what my mother was going through at the time. And obviously that defining event, the loss of a parent at such a young age, has molded me and been very important in what I am today.
That's really beautiful, because you didn't have a father figure in your life to guide you, being a male, and many males need that. And you started businesses from a very young age, the first one being at 10 years old. But you then went to university, and that's when you started the real stuff, the good stuff.
Yes.
So take us back to your university days. You were studying, you were doing an undergrad in actuarial science. How did it begin?
So it's actually quite interesting. As I say, well, my passion when I was growing up was always maths. I absolutely loved maths. And as a matter of fact, at that stage when I was getting ready for university, it was always my idea to just go and become a mathematician. However, I was told that becoming a mathematician was certainly not going to make me rich or
not poor.
Not poor, yes. So I remember speaking to people, and the obvious choice to me was then to become an actuary. I started university, and I started with my majors were maths and actuarial science. However, whilst I was at varsity as I was at school, I always had something on the go that I was doing to make money. And whilst at varsity, I set up a business, and I was buying and selling computers, computer components. This is in the late 80s, very different to the field today. And I started up a business where I would sell computers to friends. I would install them, set them up, etc. And so much to the extent that I remember walking into a lecture once in university, and the lecturer said, "Oh, I thought you had dropped out," because
you were more focused on your business than university.
I did get my undergrad, but never actually went on to become an actuary as per se, but obviously finished the degree.
Now, this business was your first real business.
Correct.
And it didn't have such a happy ending for you, but yet taught you some incredible, valuable lessons that you now live by and hold by.
Shireen, let me just correct you on that. The eventual ending of that business was actually a stunning success. However, at first, when I started off the business, I was very gung-ho, really doing well. And then I hit a major obstacle. I was very trusting, knew very little about the true business world. And what happened is that I got my largest order ever. Wow, I was excited. Here I was going to really make a fortune of money. Little did I know, the person that had given me the order had set me up, and it was a total fraudulent order, and I lost, back in those days, the equivalent of 280,000 Rand, which in the late 80s was a considerable amount. As a matter of fact, it was more than the value of my mother's property that we lived in.
Wow.
And at that stage, there I was 18, 19, having just been literally swindled by someone for a large amount of money. And I remember at the time seeking legal advice as to what to do. And I remember I went to 3 attorneys at the time. And the first attorney said, it's very simple. You're a man of straw. Turn around to your creditor and say to him, look, I can't pay you, and leave it to them. If they want to liquidate or sequestrate me, they would still land up with nothing. I went to a second attorney. The second attorney said the exact same thing to me. Rowan, you're a man of straw. Let them sue you. There's nothing further you can do. And then I went to a third attorney, and he said to me, Rowan, here's your choices. You can either get out of this, or you can go the liquidation route. And we devised a plan whereby we went back to the business and we offered to help them with a whole lot of repairs and services that they required, which enabled them to function in a better way. And that way I was able to not only pay off my debt, but over the 3 years that I used to actually pay off this debt, I actually built up a very good business in services, etc. So having taken a situation where I was swindled, knocked down, etc., managed to turn that round, and out of that came up with a business that was profitable, functional, etc. from this experience.
And I think not only did you land up with a good business, but you actually landed up with an incredible reputation, because many people would have taken the easy route of saying, I'm just going to go into liquidation and sorry, I owe you the money. But you chose a completely different path, which many don't do. And that is really part of your value system of who you are, a man of integrity, a man of authenticity. Tell us more about how that molded you as a person.
So just on that, trust and integrity is paramount for me. And I also learned one thing. You'll notice in maybe some of my comments, I am quite skeptical, because today I still find it very difficult to just do a deal with someone where they shake hands and say, this is what I'm going to do. I find that trust and integrity is difficult to find out there. Everyone's got second agendas. There are a lot of people, and I do say that I have been taken for money since then, and I'm sure going forward I'll be taken again. And I think that that's quite important to know, that you need to have trust. Integrity with yourself is important, but it doesn't mean that everyone else out there is trustworthy and integrous with themselves.
Absolutely, but I think the fact that you're still prepared to take those chances and the risks is what keeps you being a maverick.
Yes.
You're still always looking out for what else can I do, what new things can I bring into the world.
Yes, so part of my reason for believing in myself as a maverick is that I explore literally anything that comes my way. I will look at things, different things, etc. I think the expert part of it comes in my ability to discipline and hone in and focus on what is good and separate the wheat from the chaff. Certainly, we see lots of opportunities. Everyone's got ideas, but one needs to be selective and make sure that one chooses the right ideas, because otherwise we just land up chasing our tails and going in the wrong direction.
And losing money.
Yes. And believe you me, there's been many investments that I have lost money.
I think it's about failing forward also.
Correct.
You know, we learn as we go, and there's different measures of success. Not all are financial. Sometimes the success is how we've grown as a person, the lessons we've learned, the people we've helped, the lives we've changed.
Correct. I like your term failing forward, because that does explain a lot of what happens out there. Often it is our failures and our more difficult times that give us the growth that we need to go forward.
Now, you revolutionized the banking industry. You came up with an incredible idea with a friend. You pursued it. As we've discussed, ideas come. Some people pursue them. Some people do stuff. Some people don't. You really were mavericked about it, and it changed South Africa. It changed people's lives, and through that you did become very successful. Tell us what that was.
So in 1999, I was approached by a friend of mine, Stephen Koch, and he had heard about an idea that was quite prevalent in the States of independently owned, privately owned ATMs. At that stage, the South African landscape was dominated, the banking landscape was dominated by four major players who still dominate today. And basically, all ATMs in the country were owned, run by the big four. Apart from one or two other smaller banks that maybe had a few hundred ATMs at max. And we decided to get into this business of independently owned ATMs, and we went into it without knowing anything about what it was about.
I think importantly to say there were no independently owned ATMs in South Africa at that point.
At that stage, all the ATMs were owned by the banks, dominated by the big four, who basically controlled everything, had certain ways of doing things, and we just went into the market without knowing what it was about. We set up this business. We actually went on a trip to the United States, met up with a supplier of independently owned ATMs. It was quite a big business at the time in the States, out of Mississippi, and gave them a bit of smoke and mirrors how we actually understood something about payments and how we understood about ATMs, which at that stage...
You were winning it.
Well, not only were we winning it, my only experience with ATMs was probably withdrawing money on my own card at an ATM. I don't think I knew much more about an ATM than that.
Yes.
We didn't even understand properly how the South African system worked. We did realize that you needed access to a central switch, which existed in South Africa. And we thought, well, we'll bring back some ATMs and we'll plug them into the switch and it'll work. So we decided, we actually went to a bank in South Africa, we went to the big four banks, and every one of them gave us the same answer. They said to you, well, what are you going to do? How are you going to help us? We're already in the ATM business. We've been there for 40 years. And we decided to approach some of the second-tier banks, and a second-tier bank came to us and said, well, they would help us to access the switch, which was what was required to process an ATM transaction. So Steve and myself went out to the 3 Fs. That's
Explain, friends, I love that.
Friends, families, and fools. Well, we first went to friends and family. Everyone turned us down. And then we found a few fools who were happy enough to back us. And we decided we're going to bring in a container of ATMs. And I'll never forget, you could get 23 ATMs into a container. We had the ATM container on the water. We went back to this bank who had said that they would help us link these ATMs to the switch, only to find that they didn't have the correct technology to actually link our ATMs, and would be over a year of development.
Oh gosh, and here were coming the ATMs.
And here we had these ATMs on the water coming into the country. We had put our own savings into it, plus, as I say,
all the fools
that we could possibly find. And we had this container coming in, and literally there was nothing we were going to be able to do. Anyway, this was in the beginning, the container arrived, it was the beginning of 2000, and we then approached another secondary bank, because after every one of the big four banks would not even entertain us. And we approached another secondary bank who did have the correct technology, and within 3 months, we were up and running with our first ATM, which was quite a surprise even to the suppliers overseas, because generally to get your first ATM up and running would take a year. So, I mean, we were very lucky, and a bit of luck with the maverick attitude. Certainly bringing in a container of ATMs and not even knowing that the bank...
That was a huge risk.
That was a huge risk.
Yes.
But we brought them in, and we started developing our own ways of doing things. And I always tell the story that we were always in contact with the big four banks, and I'll never forget, Steve and I approached one of the big four banks, and we're talking about our systems, and we had a few ATMs on the ground, and we wanted to work with, because obviously we wanted to work with the big banks. And the bank turned around to us and said, you know what, we have got the best systems in South Africa. We asked them to elaborate, and they said, well, for example, our cashing costs to cash an ATM on a monthly basis, we've got the cheapest in the country. It costs us 2,500 rands a month. And about a week later, we were with another one of the big four banks, and they said to us, well, we've got the very best systems. We cannot learn anything from you. It costs us 2,400 rand a month to cash an ATM. And I never forget getting into the car and turning around to my partner at the time and saying, Steve, we must be doing something wrong. We've only been in this business for 3-4 months, and it's costing us 1,500 rand a month to cash an ATM. And the story obviously alludes to that. As Mavericks, we had just come up with a totally different way of cashing an ATM, using a totally different methodology, which just to begin with was 40% cheaper than the banks who had been in it for 35 years, working and chipping away, coming down from 2.5 to 2.4, and eventually, I suppose, to 2.3.
Incredible. That really is Maverick, because they came with all their history, all their baggage.
That's exactly it. So they came with the ways that they had been doing it, and they would, chip away here, improve a little bit over there, and eventually get it down. But we came in with literally a fresh, clean way of looking at cashing ATMs, which to start off was well below the cost of the cost of the methodologies used by the banks.
So that was wonderful, and it was rosy for a while, and then something happened along the way,
yes,
as it always does.
As it always does, you're correct, because
life happens.
And we were working with one of the second-tier banks in South Africa, and I'll never forget, I was sitting at my desk. I used to work on a Saturday morning. We were working full-time at it, and I got a call from the head of payments at this particular bank. And I guess when you put together your business plan, you always say, well, what if a supplier supplies me late, or doesn't supply the right amount of what I need, or what if a debtor pays me on time? All these common things that you factor into your business. But the one thing that we never factored is, what if the bank that was our connection to process our transaction fell over?
That's heart-stopping material.
Correct. So we had a call, and it came through, I'll never forget, on the Saturday morning, I was sitting at my desk, and a call came through from the bank to please let us know that the bank was going into curatorship, and that the bank would be closing down, etc., etc. And I remember getting hold of my partner, Steve, And on the Sunday morning, we had a meeting of staff where we had practically every one of our staff members there at 7 in the morning on a Sunday, and we started figuring out what we were going to do. The bottom line is that in the end, our ATMs were not even off for more than 24 hours.
That's incredible.
Yeah. So we
What
immediately,
did you do?
Well, we immediately got onto it. We worked quite closely with the curator that had taken over wasn't responsible for the winding up of the bank. And what we managed to arrange was that our ATMs would be available, and obviously the card holders of the bank that had gone into curatorship couldn't withdraw money over a certain amount, but all our other transactions we were able to process through our network.
That's incredible. A huge relief.
And a huge relief, because at that stage we had 600 ATMs. And I'll tell you, often funny things happen, because it was just a few months ago, when we originally started up our ATM network, each ATM connected directly with this particular bank. So we had 600 points of access going into the bank. And probably 3 to 4 months before the bank went to curatorship, we put in our own central switch, which meant that all 600 ATMs connected centrally to our switch, and we had then one point of access going into the big bank. Had we not done this, the effect of us moving 600 ATMs individually to another bank would have been huge. But fortunately, we had our own switch, and over the next 2-3 months, by that stage, we had 600 ATMs, and working with one of the bigger banks, they had now woken up to the idea that there was value and there was something that we had that was different from them. And it was just a matter of literally taking our switch and switching our transactions to one of the big four banks. So we started working, and ultimately we landed up working with all three of the big four banks, and as well as a lot of second-tier banks. The business also evolved into a payments business, and eventually in 2012 was part of a listing on the Johannesburg Stock Exchange.
And is still today an incredibly successful, viable business.
Yes. I'm no longer involved in the business itself, but it is still an incredibly viable business and working in numerous countries around the world, from Eastern Europe, Africa, etc. They've expanded their reach on a global scale.
That's an incredible story, and you really broke new ground despite struggles and despite having many heart-failing moments. You were able to overcome them. You said to me, and that the title of your chapter, It Is What It Is something that you live by. And I think that there's different ways of looking into that. And, you took the situation and never accepted it. You expanded on it and said, it is what it is. I'm going to make it better. Correct. And that's really been your motto in life.
Yes. So, I've often used that motto in life. It is what it is. And a lot of people would look at that and say, but is there not a bit of abject resignation? It is what it is. So I always say, you can be born into a poor family. It is what it is. You can lose a parent at a very young age. It is what it is. You can go into business at the age of 18 and have a tremendous setback where someone comes and swindles you for a large amount of money. It is what it is. And at the end of the day, it is these experiences and understanding it is what it is that make us what we are.
I think that's really what makes you so unique, is many people go through these experiences and we keep repeating the same stuff over and over and over again. And so I'm going to ask you, what is the one thing that you're most proud of in your journey to becoming a maverick? I know you mentioned you have a beautiful daughter, yes, and I'm sure that she's part of it, because you've explained to me that your maverick abilities aren't only about entrepreneurship and business.
Yes. So, just going back to what I said earlier on, it was never my intent to make money. It was always my intent not to be poor. And from that, I imply that there's a balance in my life. It's not simply focused on making money and building businesses. My daughter is without a doubt the most special and most precious thing in my life. And I've always made sure that I've had time for my daughter, regardless of the circumstances or what I was doing around myself. So over the years, I've always had it that Thursdays, I would fetch my daughter from school and we would always do something unique and different. And Thursdays were known to my daughter as Daddy Day.
I love the way you explained the days of the week. Would you like to share that?
Yes. When my daughter was younger and you'd say to her, now, please tell us the days of the week, she would go Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Daddy Day. She would always refer to Thursdays as Daddy Day. And she knew, come hell or high water, Dad was fetching her from work, from school, and the afternoon was ours. And that is something that's just really ingrained in me, is to be able to have other interests and other motivations in life, be it sport, be it community, be it just so many other bits and pieces.
So what are some of the things that you do for downtime to fill your passion and to get away from stress? We all have stress, no matter what it is that we do. What do you do?
So I've always been quite involved in community, charity work, and very involved in mentoring other businesses, helping other businesses. I have a number of people that come to me on a regular basis for mentorship in their business, be it a small business, a single person at home baking and cooking, supplying the locals in the neighborhood, or larger businesses. And I've always felt that being able to give back to the community is very important. And I've always tried to make that a priority in my life, that I'm able to give back. As I've said, it's very important to spend time with my daughter. I also look after my health and do a lot of cycling and a lot of exercise. And I think that one needs to be balanced. I also have a number of other passions which I like to spend time on, ranging from creative passions such as art and music. And I think that one needs to make sure that
you have a balance. I think that's really what you're saying, is you really do have a balance. And just to go back to you being a mentor, when we give, that actually fills us up the most. And being a maverick, it's important to be able to share that. And it's beautiful to see your mentees' successes when they are successful, or to talk them and guide them through their difficult struggles and challenges.
Yes, that is 100%. And you know, the thing that gives me great pleasure is when you see someone, and as I say, it could have been a single woman who's also gone through stress, got a few kids, etc., and got a small business, and they help that, and helping them to get that business to flourish and make an impact not just on that person's life, but their family life and their kids' lives, etc. So that is always a great great sense of achievement for myself when I see those sort of things. Approximately 10 years ago, I was actually involved in the setting up of a entrepreneurial mentorship program in South Africa, which over the years has serviced hundreds of businesses, some successfully, some not successfully, but has had hundreds of successes in building up businesses. We have on our books, it's a network of mentors that we call in to help businesses that come to us. We have over 300 successful business people in South Africa who mentor, and we can call on them at any time to help us with these businesses, and just been an amazing success.
That's really an incredible initiative, because it's almost like not feeding the poor, but teaching the poor to feed themselves. And
Correct.
Each person that you help has an impact on so many other people.
Yes.
So it's change one person and change the world. That is a beautiful way to live, and a beautiful way to make the world a better place. What 5 things can others learn from mistakes that you have made? So we all make mistakes, and sometimes we learn lessons. What can others learn from your mistakes so that they maybe don't do the same things?
Well, I don't know if I've got exactly 5 or more, but there are a couple of different things that I've learned from my mistakes. I think the first thing, which goes back to the definition of a maverick, is to try and be creative. When something goes wrong, your bank, that is your lifeline to your transactions, goes down. You need to think creatively of what are you going to do to take this forward. Give you the example when I had that person swindle me out of a large amount of money. Creatively, what could I do, and how could I take that to the next step and do something that would actually benefit me and actually turn this bad situation into a negative situation? So one needs to be able to think creatively. And also, one of the things that I've said in my maverick approach is also to be able to separate the wheat from the chaff. One needs to be able to hone in on the issue, what is important, and not get too distracted by all the noise, the ambient noise going around you. So that's very important. Also to be able to focus on what are the important issues.
And to take the emotion out of it sometimes.
Yes. That's probably one of my hardest things, because I suppose having come from a situation of abandonment, I know that you are always dealing with people, and I care about people. And I must say that that's one of the issues that I often grapple with, because people do matter. On the flip side of that is I've learned the hard way that, there are a lot of people out there with different agendas, with negative agendas, etc. And one must always just cover one's bases as such, without trying to sound too skeptical. One must understand who you're working with. I think that over the years, and as one becomes more successful, I'm now in a position that I don't have to work with people that I don't feel comfortable with. I can really select the partners, the people that I work with, and I am very selective about that. If I don't want to work with someone for whatever reason, I don't. And perhaps when you first go into business, you'll work and you'll deal with anyone because you're trying to grow a business. But as you become more successful, you become more selective. And the flip side of that as well, as you become more selective, so you become more successful.
Because you're able to choose the
Correct.
better opportunities. But I think it's also about being street savvy, street smart, keeping your wits about you, and not being too vulnerable.
Yes. I mean, it's always about learning. It's always about progressing and not standing still and being in the same position.
Did you ever come to a crossroads in your life where you thought, what am I doing? I wish I had done things differently. I wish I was doing something else now. Or have you always felt that you were in flow and happy with where you were?
So it's quite interesting, because I've had many crossroads in my life, and I always find that those crossroads are times which enable us to sit back, think, and decide what we want to do next. What is there for the next phase of our life? And I've had some interesting crossroads whereby, it's very simple when you start building a business to be focused on the money and focused on being rich. Now, if that's integral with yourself, fair enough. Let that be your major focus. And I know some wonderful people whose major focus is to make money. I've always felt that there was more that I want, and people can get a balance out of just making money. And I know people like that, but I've always felt that I needed other things in my business, in my life. I needed to be able to give back. I needed to be able to explore my creative side, etc. And I have often had an opportunity of being able to sit back, reflect, and make sure that I was heading in the direction that I wanted to move in, and often to change that direction. I even said to you that at present, I am at a crossroads in my life. I've been successful financially, and I've been successful in a number of other areas. And, it's all very well to say, why are you working so hard at the age of 30? And you say, well, I'm working hard so that at the age of 60, I can ride my bike. Or even again at 40, why are you working so hard so I can ride my bike when I'm 60? But what if you can ride your bike when you actually are 40? So I think one must never lose sight of what are the things that you want to have in your life, what are the things that drive you. And once again, it's easy to get involved in something and look back and 10 years later and say, I've been working for the last 10 years to ride my bike, but could have been on my bike 5 years ago.
And maybe for people struggling, as you mentioned before, there needs to be that balance. So maybe ride your bike a bit and still follow your passion.
Well, I think that one needs to understand what your passions are. You know, at the end of the day, the most successful person is not the person that has the most money. It's the person who has the amount of money that he's happy with, that he feels fulfilled. Yes, it's about personal fulfillment. It's not necessarily checking, am I faster than the next person? Am I richer than the next person?
But am I the fastest I can be?
Am I going as fast as I want to be?
I love that.
You know?
So do you believe in the analogy of follow your passion, do what you love, and the money will follow, as opposed to focusing on the money? Many successful people have said that.
So I think that if you have a passion for making money, then actually making money it doesn't become a job or a chore. It becomes following your passion, same as riding a bike or doing something else might be. It actually becomes a wonderful part of your existence, and it's not seen as a job.
And work isn't work anymore.
Work isn't work. Work is a hobby. So if your work is a hobby, you'll generally do well. I mean, I do have to say that not everyone who's focused on money does make money.
Yes.
And it's sad that some people may not be able to find that as their main passion, be successful. But one needs to also fill yourself up with things that do stimulate you, you do find it passionate, and that those things actually bring you fulfillment, happiness, and wealth, even if it's not specifically financial wealth.
In terms of someone becoming a maverick today in a really difficult economic environment where it's very hard to follow your passion without having money or being in a dead-end job, what would you say?
My suggestion to all mavericks out there are to be realistic about it. You know, one of the big things that we often see, people bring a business idea and it's very easy on a spreadsheet to add an extra zero. And by the time you've added a few more zeros,
it looks unbelievable.
It looks unbelievable. And the truth with life is it's not always as simple as that. Be creative, follow your passion, but also be cognitive of when you need to cut and when you need to move on to something else. Because not every $1 million idea is worth $1 million. And I think that's quite important for the mavericks out there. And to become an expert maverick, you need to be able to cut, to know when to cut as well as to know when to push.
You have a favorite book that you mentioned to me that has some very profound messages and lessons in life. Tell us about that.
So I do a fair amount of reading, but there's one book that I like to pick up from time to time, and that's Paulo Coelho's The Alchemist. And the story about The Alchemist is of a shepherd boy's search for where he wants to get to and where he wants to be. And he goes on a huge story and a huge adventure, and really only to come back to the place that he started and find that that was where the wealth and the opportunity stood. And I think that the message that comes out of that is that we're always on a journey, but we must always remember where we start, and we must always remember where we finish and where we are at all times.
And where we plan to go.
Correct.
And about enjoying the moment.
And enjoying the moment and finding sometimes that what we were looking for was there all along. I don't want to sound too cliched, but it is true that sometimes it's the simpler things in life that give us the greatest satisfaction.
Like your daughter.
Like my daughter, yes.
Absolutely. So what's next for you? Do you have any unfulfilled giant dreams that you want to achieve, or something that you want to attempt now that you've kind of reached the stage where you have the freedom to do what you want, to live the life of your dreams?
Yes.
Where to next?
So as I mentioned earlier on, I've had in my life a number of things that I've enjoyed doing. And when I was younger, I was very much into my art and creativity, and that's always taken a back seat over the years. At present, I'm actually trying to write a book.
Fantastic.
And I'm not going to talk too much about what's in it because it's quite a daunting task for me, and I understand now what they mean by writer's block. And sincerely, I hope that I'm able to write a book, find some of my stuff that I was passionate about earlier on in my life. And on top of that, there are a few other things that I've always wanted to do with my life and will focus a lot more on in my life as I go forward.
And you mentioned travel being one of them.
Travel, seeing places, experiencing cultures. I mean, that's always been a big thing for me. And funny enough, I have traveled. I've made it an important thing in my life to travel to different places. I'll never forget, a few years ago, I turned around to my daughter, and I think she was 9 or 10. I said, "Where do you want to go?" And she said, "Dad, let's go to the Galapagos Islands." And
that's a very unusual request from a 9-year-old.
Yes. Well,
did she even know what the Galapagos Islands were?
Well, I'll tell you. I said to her, "Where do you want to go?" And she did a bit of research. She went onto the internet, and the first thing she actually came back, she said she wanted to go on a trip to see snow leopards in the Himalayas.
Wow.
And I did a bit of research on it, and I found trips that do it, but none of them would guarantee you the chance of seeing it. So
most 9-year-olds want Mickey Mouse in Disney World.
Yes, no, that was not my daughter. She actually wanted to go see snow leopards. So I actually said, find something else, because first of all, a lot of walking, a lot of hiking, and may have been too physical for her at the time. And she came back to me and she said, "Dad, I want to go to the Galapagos Islands." And that's the sort of thing.
Where is the Galapagos Islands?
It's about 1,000 kilometers west of the coast of Ecuador, and it's volcanic islands that have got unique flora and fauna. As a matter of fact, Darwin, on his voyage around the world in the Beagle, stopped there, and it was his study of the finches that lived on the different islands, because they all had different beaks and all had different characteristics, that actually helped him formulate his origin of the species and his theories that have obviously been developed into evolution, etc., as we know them today.
And travel is the biggest education of life.
Love traveling.
Anything you could learn, traveling and experiences we gather are probably the most profound.
Yes. And experiences, just being able to have different experiences as you travel around different places. I recall a number of years ago getting stuck in the mountains on a motorbike. I used to do a lot of motorbiking, getting stuck in the middle of Lesotho, and nightfall was coming, and one of the bikes had broken down, and one of the guys we were with had actually broken his ankle, and we were literally in the middle of nowhere. And we stumbled across a village, and we were brought into the village by the chief of the village, and they cleared one of their huts for us, and we all slept on the floor of a hut. You cannot replace those experiences with anything else. I mean,
absolutely.
In the middle of nowhere, to be brought into a hut, the people, the villagers came and brought us water, which, for them, they had to walk kilometers to get some water, and they brought us water, and I'll never forget, they cleaned our hands and our feet.
Unbelievable.
And it was just an amazing experience.
Well, research done out of Harvard on happiness actually says that, when we reach a certain level of financial wealth, earning more doesn't make us happier. Getting married, we get happier for a little while and then it kind of peters off. So being married doesn't make us happier. But the one thing that really has been proven to increase our happiness level, and not only for the moment that we experience it, but actually for years afterwards is travel and experiences. Because when you go on a journey, you plan for it before.
Yes.
So it's the journey doesn't start when you get on the plane or the bus or the train. Well, it's the preparation and the excitement and the anticipation.
The one thing that I always recommend to people, if you are traveling, as much as it's fun to travel and do things at the last minute and just get in a car. And I've done that before. I've literally got into a car and driven around South Africa for 2 weeks without any plans or any accommodation booked. But if you book far in advance, it increases your happiness, because you book 6 months in advance. You've got 6 months of excitement.
You're talking about it, planning it,
etc. And
then you remember that story for years and years and years and years in your mind.
Correct. So just going back to the Galapagos example, I mean, my daughter to this day talks about it. And it's quite interesting. She was 10 at the time, and 9 or 10 at the time, and we got onto a boat, and she was the life and soul of the boat. I mean, she's still in contact through email and on Facebook with some of these people, and it was people from all over the world. There were people from the United States, there were people from Hong Kong, everyone on the boat, and I mean, still being in contact with these people from all over the world.
Years later, and who knows what opportunities and doors that will open later on in life for her.
Correct.
Rowan, it's been an absolute treat and an honor to hear your story. To end, can you tell us, what do you stand for? What do you live by? What do you hold in your heart? What is the message that you wish to leave in the world? Anything you want to share with us?
Just something that I think is very important. And we talked about integrity, but for me as well is one should always carry humility with them as well. Everyone has got different abilities. And just because one is successful in one and one is born with a certain aptitude for whether it be maths, money, or running, I think that having humility about what you do and being responsible and accountable for what you do is very important. And I'd like to keep that message at the foremost, that whatever you do it to your best ability. Find what you are good at. Find what works for you. If you can be a maverick and an expert and repeated maverick, then make sure that you still maintain a sense of humility and integrity, specifically with yourself.
Thank you, Rowan. It's been an honor and a pleasure.
Thank you, Shireen. That was good.
And there you have it. What an excellent interview. Thank you to our guest interviewer, Shireen Richter. She's interviewing people for her book, Expert Mavericks, which is going to be released later this year. We're looking forward to more interviews from Shireen, but until then, like and share, and we'll see you next time on the show.
Thanks for listening to Business Innovators Radio. To hear all episodes featuring leading industry influencers and trendsetters, visit us online at businessinnovatorsradio.com today.